Hi, Sam from the AEW Match Guide here with a quick announcement before we get started. A week or so after recording today's episode, I received direct quotes from one of the wrestlers that was in the match we're looking at today, Matt Jackson. Yes, that is correct. That is the Matt Jackson of the Young Bucks. Now, Imp and I had already recorded the full episode, but we did not want to let this amazing opportunity go to waste. So we have added on a special segment at the end of the normal episode where we'll be discussing Matt's thoughts on a number of things that went into this match, including some things that neither of the Bucks have ever spoken about before publicly. Now, that doesn't give you permission to skip straight to the end, but honestly, I probably wouldn't blame you if you did. But let's stop beating around the bush. Let's hit those horns and get in with today's episode. Welcome to the AEW Match Guide podcast, where we deep dive into the best matches in AEW history. Brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network and your host, Sam Brown. Hello and welcome to the AEW Match Guide podcast. I'm your host, Sam Brown. Thank you for joining me. Today, we continue with the fourth season of the Match Guide, where we'll be looking beyond the ropes of Tony Khan's ring to the matches, wrestlers, promotions, and movements that influenced all elite wrestling. If you enjoy the show today, you can subscribe or rate it on your podcast app of choice, support the Social Suplex financially through Red Circle, and make sure you check out all of the other great shows on the Social Suplex Podcast Network, where we cover all aspects of the world of pro wrestling. We've got One Nation Radio, Keeping It Strong Style, All Things Elite, Tunnel Talk, the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast, Wrestle Art with Chris Things, It's AEW Adventure, and Joshing Around. And you can subscribe to the Social Suplex newsletter at socialsuplex.com/newsletter. Become part of the Social Suplex community by joining our Discord, where you can chat with the hosts of all our podcasts, as well as other wrestling fans from around the world. Links from all of these things are in the podcast description. My guest today is a vagabond. He's a rapscallion. He's the host of Imp's AEW Adventure. It's Matt Mayer, a.k.a. Imp, and we're looking at the Golden Lovers versus the Young Bucks from Strong Style Evolved, New Japan Pro Wrestling in 2018. Hello, Imp. It's great to have you here on the podcast again.
On the AEW, does it count as the AEW match horse once again?
Match horse?
It's a match horse. We voted for Hangman to be the best wrestler in AEW. We got to stick with it. We've got to stick to our guns. Don't listen to what the commenters said. Don't listen to the people.
I don't think I've ever heard it called the match horse before, but you can keep that as your own theme.
But does it count as being on that when it's stuff that leads to AEW or things that lead us to how we got to where we are with the AEW style and everything?
Well, that's what we're looking at this season. That's what we're looking at this season. You know, we had the massive long run, like a massive multi-year story 2 weeks ago, talking to Trish about Tetsuya Naito and Kazuchika Okada. And I figured that, a build of 7 years, I felt like that wasn't long enough. So I decided we'd talk about the Golden Lovers for the second episode of the season.
Or if you thought the episode with Trish was long, strap in.
I did start out that episode by asking her how many words she had in her note count. So you're lucky I don't ask you that one, Imp. I've done too many podcasts with you to know to ask you that question. Imp, we should probably get into this episode pretty quickly because we are going to be going in depth about a lot of different things that did have. It's almost like we'll talk about it. It's almost like a prelude to what AEW is going to be, because it's 2018. It's the year right before AEW comes to fruition. At this point, Tony Khan he's talking to Warner Brothers. He's seeing the vision. They've started to sell tickets to All In. So, it's a really exciting time in wrestling 2018. I remember being so into all of this in 2018. It was, such an exciting thing to be seeing. You're seeing the wrestling industry change before your very eyes. And a lot of it is centered around New Japan Pro Wrestling at the time, Imp. And I definitely think you are someone who helped get me into New Japan. Back in the forum days on the old Lords of Pain forum, you were one of the people who was covering it and who was promoting it and talking about it and saying these are the matches to watch, these are the things. So talk to me and tell the good folks, how was it that you got into New Japan Pro Wrestling, Imp?
I think it's because AJ Styles went over, and then I heard the news that he'd like won the championship immediately. And the bigger thing was it was 2014 WWE. Who remembers 2014 WWE? It's not as bad as 2019 WWE, but it's still pretty bad. So I was like kind of disillusioned. They're doing that push for Roman Reigns at that point when he's not ready. Daniel Bryan's got hurt. CM Punk's gone. Like, it's not a good time to be a WWE fan at that point. And
hey, you say that, Imp. That was the year I got back into wrestling.
Oh yeah,
watching WWE, and we're going to talk about it later in this season. Actually, we're going to talk about the Shield versus the Wyatts from Elimination Chamber that year, and actually, I'm keen to talk about some Daniel Bryan from that sort of era of Daniel Bryan as well, later on in this season as well. But I've locked in that episode, so yeah, you say 2014 WWE, but we're going to be talking about it here on the podcast, the ups and the downs. But go on, go on. Tell me how you're going to New Japan.
Post WrestleMania WWE, because Shield Wyatt's Elimination Chamber, that's in the good period. We've had that with last year with WWE, where it was exciting enough with John Cena and everything, but after WrestleMania, oh dear, the rest of the year is pretty bad. Same with 2014, where the run to WrestleMania was all right, and the rest of the year was pretty bad. So I got disillusioned, but I still loved wrestling. And I never really checked out New Japan. I'd wanted to at the time when I decided to finally check out a different wrestling. The G1 Climax was on for that year. And I was like, you know what? Let's just try and get into it. So I got to watch amazing matches with like Luke Gallows versus Bad Luck Fale. Like, they're not all winners. It's a G1. But that was my introduction to Honma, with like Honma Running Wild, Honma Mania. I can't remember what it was called now.
You say your introduction to Honma now, like that is something people are like, oh wow, you discovered Honma. These people don't understand that Honma was once incredible.
Like somebody said, he's got a voice like gravel going down a rain pipe. Like, it's just like I love the time he did commentary for one show, and it's just like like, what are you doing a commentary on? But anyway, yeah, he generally was one of the wrestlers I got into the most in that G1. But that's one with Kazuchika Okada and Shinsuke Nakamura in the final. So it's a top tier G1. But yeah, I just watched the whole tournament, and that got me into it. And I didn't watch any other shows until Wrestle Kingdom. So I just watched the G1, then I watched Wrestle Kingdom. And it was I'm trying to remember, 2015. Is that the AJ? That's the AJ start. No, that's 2016. I get confused. But yeah, it's a really strong year. So that really got me into New Japan, just watching the G1 and watching Wrestle Kingdom. And I didn't really look back until COVID. And then at COVID, COVID was not a good time for New Japan. And I've not really got back on since. But in 2018, we are like smack bang in the middle of not just like my New Japan fan like peak or anything, but New Japan for Wrestling is the best like critically received, fan received like wrestling promotion in the world for like a 3-4 year stretch. Like, I want to say 2015 to 2019 maybe. There's some bollocks going on with double titles and double Wrestle Kingdom nights by the time you get to 2019, but it's still like relatively treated as this is the best promotion. This is the one to keep up with. So yeah, so 2018 is like smack bang in the middle of it. But as you're saying, that was also when they made a huge push into the US, and that's kind of where we find ourselves for this match. Is New Japan Pro Wrestling are trying to set up a established fan base in the US, and their attempts to do that is what directly leads to AEW forming instead, and what leads to then the tensions when AEW first started, and like the owner of New Japan feeling a bit, I don't know if the word was rejected or whatever.
Undercut.
Yeah, so it took a change in leadership for the New Japan AEW relationship to even begin properly, which was a bit of a shame because it screamed there should have been a relationship to begin with. But yeah, they but it was that tension because they wanted to use these guys to set up their own America thing, and then they were like, "Oh God, we're so popular, we could even set up our own one." And then they got Tony Khan on board. Like, yeah, let's do that. I won't talk about the match now. But when the match is finished, you can, if you look around the arena, you can just see people are just buzzing. Like, there's just something really special in the air, and that just carries through all the way to AEW's launch.
That's a great way to put it. There's a buzz about, and people are so engaged. I remember going to a show in Australia this year, and they packed out an arena. They have zero TV in Australia, and they would have sold like a good 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 tickets for this arena in Sydney off the back of like New Japan World, just there's just so much buzz around this amongst the hardcore wrestling community at this time. So yeah, really incredible time to be a New Japan fan at this point. And we're going to talk about this particular match and why that is. There's so many things going on that are awesome, but one in particular, the Golden Lovers versus the Young Bucks, I think is incredibly historically significant and also has a lot going into it for us to dig into. So well worth our time on this episode today. So let's start. And we're going to start, as we always do, with talking about the story and the build-up. And there's sort of three things going on, and we're going to break them down at once because people who know this story as well, they know that this has got roots 10 years before this match happens. It's an absolutely it's bringing in threads from years and years past. So there's the part one is the Golden Lovers. That's sort of the first thread that's going on, which is Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi. The second part is what's going on with the Young Bucks, which is them, particularly their move up to heavyweight and looking to progress forward in their career, and particularly within New Japan, and also for their position as potentially the best tag team in the world and wanting to solidify that legacy. And then there is also the third part, which sort of brings it all together, is what I call the Bullet Club Civil War. That happens in 2018 and sort of it starts, there's bits of it are sort of starting in 2017, but then it all explodes in 2018. And this is probably one of the heightened flashpoints of it all. So we're going to break it down into those sorts of three parts. Let's start talking about the Golden Lovers. Now, there is so much lore with this team. This is a very, very deep topic, way more than we have time to deal with here on this podcast today. So I'm just going to talk. Feel free to jump in at any point if you just want to expand on something. But I'm just going to kind of do a real brief history of the Golden Lovers, who they are, what their story is, and how they came about and what it looked like as these two wrestlers progressed. So, of course, the Golden Lovers are Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi. Kenny Omega from Canada, Kota Ibushi from Japan. A very unlikely coupling, but one that worked extremely well together. The legend is that Kenny Omega, he actually tried out for the WWE and he was in part of their feeder system. There's even a promo, I think. I remember when there was the old WWE Network, there was a Kenny Omega promo on that from when it was like 2008. And he looks totally different. Still jacked, still got curly hair, but, a lot younger. But apparently he very much fell out of love with wrestling through the period of trying to go through training in the WWE. But then he saw a tape of Kota Ibushi wrestling in DDT, which is the Japanese promotion DDT, wrestling in a caravan park or something. And he sends a video of him wrestling, doing this crazy street fight outdoor wrestling style, and saying he's like the king of the Canadian street fight. And from that manages to get booked in DDT. And originally he's going to go against Kota Ibushi, but instead they decide, instead of pairing these two people against each other, put them together as a team and have these two hot young studs, because they are both hot young studs at that point, as a team. And it works beyond their wildest dreams. It works so well. They are one of the biggest acts in DDT. They start to sprawl off into New Japan. And it's this really interesting partnership where there's a lot going on, where they're hugging, they're lightly kissing each other. It's very, very queer coded. They never actually outright say that they are real lovers, but their team name is the Golden Lovers, and they're certainly acting like they are. And I think part of that is there's like a lot of Japanese cultural reasons for that, I believe, that I'm not au fait with. But I think they just liked leaving it a mystery. And part of the law of the team is that they do leave it a mystery, and they let people read into it, and they let people learn, and people want to dig into it. They see things like, this person wore this thing, this person wore this thing, and there's so much symbolism in there. I'll have to shout it out. I'll probably try and find a link for it and put it in the description. There is a Medium article that is huge, massive Medium article that goes in depth about all of this sort of stuff. But essentially what happens in the team, as they progress, they, as a team, they're the biggest stars in DDT. They're also getting booked in New Japan Pro Wrestling as a tag team. But Kota Ibushi is sort of pushing ahead gradually, pulling ahead from Kenny Omega gradually, and being featured as a single star in particular in New Japan. And he sort of makes that leap earlier. And that ultimately sees the team dissolve, really, because Kota Ibushi is progressing forward as a singles wrestler, and there's just no more room in this for a team, for them as a team. And as a result of that, Kota Ibushi goes off to be a singles wrestler in New Japan, wrestling as a junior, and then kind of looking to transition up to the heavyweights. And then the whiplash of that is how that affects Kenny Omega. His golden lover has gone off, and it's not been like a split where there's a lot of anger and everything outright. They do have a match together, but it's not a match. It's not like a blood feud match. They're not, banging each other's heads together and bleeding, and there's not a lot of hate in it. It's still two people who care for each other. But with Kota Ibushi breaking the team, Kenny Omega, the next place he shows up is, instead of being on the good side of things as a face, he shows up as Bullet Club, who are the foreign invaders. And he says, I'm not the golden lover anymore. I'm not even going to speak Japanese anymore. I am in Bullet Club. And he actually costs Kota Ibushi in his first ever IWGP heavyweight match against AJ Styles that Kota Ibushi has. Kenny Omega kind of interferes. He doesn't actually physically interfere, but he goes to interfere, and that's enough to give Kota Ibushi pause, and that gives AJ Styles enough time to recover, counter what Kota Ibushi was going to do to finish him off, and ultimately win the match, which Kenny is a bit dejected about, but he has cost his golden lover the greatest title in New Japan. So that, then these two characters spiral off. Kota Ibushi ends up leaving New Japan Pro Wrestling, and there's all sorts of reasons for that, but one of them is he's lost his god. Like, this betrayal is got to be factored into that. Like, his feeling of disenfranchisement in New Japan Pro Wrestling, in kayfabe at least, meta, you don't know, but that's the beauty of this. Like, you don't know really what's going on behind the scenes as well. They never confirm any of this stuff, but he goes through like almost like a midlife crisis and ends up leaving New Japan. He goes off to the WWE, goes off to wrestle in the Cruiserweight Classic, goes to England, and he's in like an alleyway shooting Roman candles off his chest, and then doing a backflip off a car. It's crazy, but that's just who Kota Ibushi is, right? Like, he's not a human. He's an elf. He is an alien in human form, like the most graceful and angelic alien you've ever seen, but in human form. But while Kota Ibushi's gone, now it's Kenny Omega's time to shine. We know the story of Kenny Omega. If you're listening to the AEW Match Guide, like, you don't need me to tell you this story. Him and the Bucks kick out AJ Styles. He graduates to heavyweight. He wins the G1. He goes to Wrestle Kingdom and main events Wrestle Kingdom. All these things are things that Kota Ibushi's never done. He faces Kazuchika Okada in the main event of Wrestle Kingdom, 5-star match. 6-star match. Then has the Dominion, the draw. So he's now at a point where he has surpassed what Kota Ibushi had got to. And then after that draw in Dominion in 2017, going into the G1, who turns up back in New Japan Pro Wrestling? Kota Ibushi. A lot of water under the bridge. No one quite knows where these two stand with each other. And it's clear there's like some sort of tension because they're not immediately together. These are not the lovers anymore. If they were still golden lovers, they would have gone back to each other. So something's happened. They're not talking about it, but it's clear that something's happened, right? And that brings us to enter Cody Rhodes into the story. And it feels so weird seeing Cody Rhodes in this story, given what Cody Rhodes is now, but he's there, right? And he joins the Bullet Club, which is that's the faction Kenny Omega has become the de facto leader of. And when he joins the Bullet Club, him and Kenny Omega start butting heads. It sort of pops up in that Dominion, the draw that Kenny Omega has with Kazuchika Okada in Dominion. Cody comes out threatening to throw the towel in when it's clear, like, Cody doesn't need to throw the towel in. It's so clear, but Cody wants to do it because he wants to have control. He wants to have power. And a way that Cody Rhodes sees of getting underneath Kenny Omega's skin and undermining him is targeting Kota Ibushi. And so he targets Kota Ibushi. They go to Wrestle Kingdom in 2018. That's the year that Kenny Omega wrestles Chris Jericho. Cody Rhodes has a match with Kota Ibushi, and he says he's saying in the lead up to that, he's saying things like, "Why doesn't Kenny love me like he loves you?" Or "I love Kenny more than you love Kenny." He doesn't really mean any of this stuff. He's just trying to get under their skin, right? And they have a match at Wrestle Kingdom. Kota Ibushi wins. Cody is not happy about that and attacks Kota Ibushi. At New Year's Dash afterwards, Kenny Omega runs him off, says, "No, you can't attack Kota Ibushi after this match." He pushes him away. Cody is not happy about that. And then finally, this all sort of culminates, this whole Golden Lovers arc that I'm trying to sum up as quickly as I can, culminates at the first major pay-per-view event, the first major event after Wrestle Kingdom, where Kenny Omega has a match for the IWGP US Championship against Jay White. Jay White has challenged him for that. In his own, he's doing his own little story where he rejects going into Bullet Club because he wants to. He knows that he doesn't want to be Kenny Omega's underling, and he beats Kenny Omega for the title. And afterwards, Hangman Page comes out to challenge another person for Bullet Club. You know, all these names are coming in. Hangman Page comes out to challenge, as is tradition, that you can do that in New Japan. And Kenny Omega actually says no. He makes it clear that no, it's not your time to challenge Hangman Page. I'm going to be the one that challenges Jay White. Cody comes in and uses that as ultimately the way to split everything and blow everything up. He gets in his face. Hangman Page gets in Kenny Omega's face. Everything blows up. The Young Bucks get in there. They accidentally get tossed aside by Kenny Omega and sort of take offense at that. And then as it looks like everything's been resolved, Kenny and Cody are the last two people to leave the ring. Cody looks to open the ropes, grabs Kenny Omega, hits him with a crossroads, goes to whack him with a chair. And with everyone gone and none of the Bullet Club left to stop Cody, who is it that runs him off? Kota Ibushi runs to the ring to save Kenny Omega. All this water under the bridge, but Kota Ibushi can't let Cody destroy Omega with a chair. Comes in, chases Cody Rhodes off, and then they stand up. And I'm picturing it now. I'm picturing this moment now. If you've never seen it, it's a really incredible segment to watch because you look at the body language of these two. It's clear that Kenny still feels guilty about what he did to Kota Ibushi, how he turned his back on him so vociferously and joined Bullet Club and betrayed him. But it's clear that he needs him and that he's completely alone and that he's sad and that he wants to have this connection. And after a tense couple of moments and like lovingly staring into each other's eyes, tensely staring into each other's eyes, they hug. And there's confetti going off and everyone's happy because the Golden Lovers, after this many, many years, and this is just the beginning of the story we're talking about right tonight, folks. This is just the setup. They finally reunited. It's a really beautiful reunion. And the Golden Lovers, after being apart for 4 years, they're finally reunited to wrestle together. They're hugging it out in the ring, and there's confetti going off. Imp, I've just talked. I need to take a sip of my tea. It's such a beautiful scene, though, isn't it? It's like
it is.
It's a really lovely scene.
Like it's we can't kind of overstate like how understated all these different actions are across the time as well. Like I can't remember if it is a New Year's Dash show or around there. I just remember at the Ryogoku, there's a backstage bit after the show, and you just see Kenny Omega in the hallway talking to Kota Ibushi, and none of it's on mic, and it looks like they're having a really serious conversation, and that's all you get. And I remember that at the time, the internet just went crazy for that. Like it was Kota Ibushi and Kenny Omega actually talking to each other on camera for the first time in years. And
or just before that, to jump in, just before that, like the lead up, the build up after the G1 final, Kenny Omega's getting taken on the shoulders of the Bucks and he's just lost. Kota Ibushi standing there to like try and console him, and the Bucks are like, no, now's not the time, and walking past Kota Ibushi. So like they're showing these little glimpses continue, and you know, like these little glimpses building up moment by moment to this point where they all reunite.
Because I remember at the time as well, the vibe was, it was done in such an understated way that there were genuinely people questioning whether they were even telling any story because it was so understated. But obviously, if you're paying attention and looking at all the notes, it felt pretty clear that they were telling something, whether it was something that was ever going to pay off, because obviously it's wrestling, you set things up, sometimes they just don't come to fruition or whatever. But yeah, it was so well done, to the point where when they did do that final segment, Kota Ibushi comes out and hugs everybody who had been saying, no, look, they were setting up all these notes over the course of these years we're talking about. Because I think the two bits the two segments, I guess, that me and you were talking about are like 6 months apart.
Yep.
Like the G1 final and then the talk at the New Year's Bash. Like, that is a long period of time to have two understated notes. Like neither of these are like huge deals. But I remember just being, also not to forget as well, is at the time, even though these notes were understated, they would in a similar fashion get repeated on Being the Elite as well. So,
and there's also things like the gear that different part they're wearing, like Kenny Omega, when Kota Ibushi returns, Kenny Omega has like, there's like a weird, like the color of the wing on his pants now matches Kota Ibushi's colors when previously it didn't. And we're so used to in like wrestling to just being absolutely smashed over the head with the subtlety hammer. Like it's just bludgeoned into us by Michael Cole, just smashing it and showing us replays and making sure we don't miss the subtle thing that we're doing. Make sure you didn't miss the subtle thing that we're doing. We're replaying it because it happened an hour ago and now we're doing a replay of the because you can't miss the subtle thing we're doing. Like it's so restrained what they're doing in this moment and in the build up, and the effect that it has is that when the climax happens, it makes it more impactful.
So I guess for people like me and you as well, where because we did film production at university, our brains got broken. So we can't just watch a thing without going, why are they showing us this thing? And especially with WWE at the time, you never activated that brain at all. Like that part of the brain never happens because they're telling you everything. They're not really showing. They obviously get shown it and things, but you know what I mean. There's anything that is shown is told ad nauseum. So that part of our brain never really got activated. Suddenly we turn to New Japan and it's all whirling. There's everything. It's just like, well, why have you shown this if it's not a thing they're saying or whatever? But it's the fact that it would be such a long period of time before you got your next note as well, which has made it like even more special. And then he finally comes out, and just that feeling of vindication, being like, see, they were telling this story the entire time. And it was all done almost in the background. It's such a huge explosive moment. And of course, every single dynamic shift in this meant that when you watched Being the Elite, the dynamic on that show also changed and shifted with the stories that they were setting up there. And so you got ripple effects and things as well. I remember being so excited.
I should add also the stuff with Cody is also very subtle in the way that they're building that up.
Oh yeah.
Like building up to this moment where Cody finally attacks Kenny Omega and completely turns on him. It's also being built up that way. But yeah, look, I should just round out by poor Jay White. Of course, he wins his first title in New Japan. He doesn't get any confetti, but Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi hugging each other and everybody, they get the confetti.
This is chaos, Jay White, as in, what are you doing in this stable? This makes no sense, Jay White. So this is like, but before he goes into Bullet Club, and it kind of just feels a lot more right. It's a much better fit. But so even though it is Jay White, it's not Jay White as we know it. It's not. I remember it's his clean shaven Jay White. Like
no, he's obviously up to something, Jay White. Like he can't his nickname's the Switchblade. Like, come on, you can't trust
Look,
that.
just listen to the lyrics of his theme song. They're all about being able to plot the different things to get the outcome you want. That's so obviously up to something.
So, the second thread, as I said, the Young Bucks. This is a bit of a quicker one, right? This is a bit of a quicker one. So Wrestle Kingdom 12, which is the one we were talking about with Kota Ibushi and Cody and Omega and Jericho. At Wrestle Kingdom 12, they wrestle Sho and Yo to win back the IWGP Junior titles for the time. They become 7-time champions at that point, which is a record. Crucially, in this match, Matt's back is injured midway through it, and it's targeted by Sho and Yo throughout. That sets up an angle that the Young Bucks would get mileage out of for years and years.
Years.
That will be important, particularly to this story, so put a pin in that. But after winning that, they then say that they think they're done with the junior division. They hang the belts in Korakuen Hall, and they say they're going to weigh up their future and they're thinking about moving to the heavyweight tag division in New Japan Pro Wrestling. So that's where they're currently headed as Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi are reuniting, which sort of sets for Bullet Club story. We've talked about the Golden Lovers, we've talked about the Young Bucks, and we've talked about Cody Rhodes, who are sort of the key figures in all of this. I call it the Bullet Club Civil War. I think that's what most people call it. Essentially, what happens in it after everything explodes is you see this really tense thing of what's happening now. These people are all in one faction still, and Cody's saying the Bullet Club is fine, but is continually agitating behind the scenes. He's continually undermining people's confidence in Kenny Omega, which is particularly as the leader. You know, there's still this tenseness of where do people's allegiances lie, because it's clear Hangman Page immediately sides with Cody for obvious reasons, like Kenny Omega really publicly humiliated him and Cody was the one that stuck up for him. But you've got the Young Bucks and Marty Scurll, who are sort of way more trapped in the middle. Kenny Omega, he's really trying to keep the peace. He doesn't want to have a fight, but the unfortunate thing is Cody doesn't care that Kenny Omega doesn't want to fight. So he just keeps on undermining things. A lot of this takes place on BTE in sort of like supplemental segments that they do, where you see Kenny trying to keep the peace, doing different things to try and keep the peace, but particularly Cody getting people one-on-one and telling, for instance, that telling the Young Bucks that, you're the best tag team in the world. You should move up to heavyweight. Telling Marty Scurll, you should focus on your singing career. And, a bit different for him, but particularly what they're doing with what he's doing with the Young Bucks, undermining it. How did you see all of this playing out, Imp?
Well, with the Young Bucks, I feel like BTE is so important compared to Kenny and Kota, which is we're talking like mostly about the New Japan side of it and what was on that. There's the odd note on BTE, as we're saying, it's more like if something was subtly hinted at, you got it. Maybe like somebody would ask a question about, "Oh, Kenny, what was that about?" And then you move on, like just into like a dialogue bit or whatever. But for the Young Bucks, it's obviously because BTE it became about them. Because I remember watching the 2015 G1 Climax, where, in their own words, they were just bored and decided to start filming themselves doing something, almost like a blog, and that's what being the Elite kind of become. So it is clearly about the Young Bucks and Kenny, but because they started using it to tell their stories. With the Young Bucks, I remember being so incredibly invested every single week a bit of BTE would drop, because this was the story, and it was at the time as well. It felt like there were no nuanced stories being told in wrestling. New Japan was doing it. I feel like we were in the middle of the Naito build in New Japan. So you hadn't had that vindication yet of seeing the Naito 4-year build, because we're in like year 2 of it. So there's still a long time to go still. But with the Young Bucks, it felt like you were getting that nuanced storytelling, which had just been absent from pro wrestling for so long. And just seeing it there, I was so incredibly invested with every single little note that they were doing.
I love the term nuance that you said, because it's interesting how in this, Like Cody is he's so obviously power hungry, manipulative. He's like such a scoundrel, such a scumbag. You know, they visited, as I said, they visited Australia at this point. And, you know, this is the first time Cody has come to Australia since he was with WWE. You know, like he should be getting welcomed as a hero. And people were shouting so loudly, "Fuck Cody Rhodes." You know, like he's getting tremendous heat by saying the Bullet Club is fine. And this is a point where people really care about the Bullet Club. And it still feels like one of the hottest things in wrestling. But in some ways, what he's saying is correct as well. And Kenny is not, and even though Kenny is the sympathetic figure in that, he is not communicating clearly with the Young Bucks. He is very obviously distracted by this reunion with Kota Ibushi and is sort of off with the fairies a bit in terms of looking at the rest of what's happening in this faction. You know, he's not there for the Young Bucks when they need him. They're trying to talk to him about how they want to, things that they want to do, how they want to progress forward, and they want to wrestle at heavyweight. And that's really important for them to communicate with Kenny because they can see he's wrestling with Kota Ibushi in the heavyweight space and they know what he is. And so they're like, we're going to be on a collision course. We need to talk about this. And there is this like really interesting at the same time, like mystery box part sort of setup where they, after what happens when Cody turns on Kenny Omega, they show this thing on BTE where they have this meeting of Kenny, Kota, and the Young Bucks in room 710. And you never know what happened there, but they mention it and they talk about it a lot, that it was very important. And so like they're bringing in all these different storytelling bits, different ways of telling stories in. But yeah, I find like the characterization there really interesting. All of them have different points. So Matt is clearly more pissed off at Kenny Omega than what Nick is. And that sort of plays into the match we're going to talk about. And the build for this match between the Lovers and the Young Bucks culminates after Kenny and Kota go on sort of a winning streak of matches. Kenny, in a post-match promo, he says that they are the greatest tag team in the world. And unfortunately, backstage at that point, and as it's shown in BTE beforehand, Matt and Nick grab him and talk to him and say, we're going to move up to heavyweight. But instead of doing that backstage to them, you know, as I said, there's communication problems here. This is how BTE tells a story, folks. Instead, the Bucks go. Cody backstage tells the Bucks to go out and to interrupt and announce that they are moving up to heavyweight and that, in fact, they are the best tag team in the world. And after this, on BTE, these two confront each other, and Matt tells Kenny, like, we've always done what's right for Bullet Club, Kenny. We've been in the junior tag division because it's what's right for Bullet Club. We've partnered you. We've cornered you in these matches. When have you cornered us in matches? And finally, we want to do something for ourselves. We want to do something for our legacy. We want to move up to heavyweight. And you don't even talk to us about it. Like, and you are now standing in our way. You are saying you're the best tag team in the world. And it's like everything you're saying is correct. Even though I sympathize with Kenny, everything you're saying is correct. And then he even says to Kota Ibushi, he says, we've been riding with Kenny for 5 years. Where were you? And it's like, that's true. It's true. Why is Kenny siding with Kota Ibushi when instead of the Young Bucks at this point, like given everything they've been through? And it feels genuinely genuinely heated, even though you can feel Cody's like been egging Matt up for this, but like it feels heated. And you can feel there's like genuine, legitimate gripes that these guys have with one another. And then Kenny's like, can't you be happy for me? I'm back with this person who makes me happy, who I care about, who I love. Why aren't you happy for me? Like, you know, you're meant to be my friends. It's like such, as I said, nuance is, it's such three-dimensional characters and storytelling that's happening here, where you've got like all these different characters colliding, banging together and reacting in ways that are natural and make sense for what's happening in the story.
Because if you were like wondering why we're talking so much about Cody Rhodes, like he is, even though he's not in the match, like he is so important to all the different character beats that are in this. Like, for example, part of his politicking was to show that he was there for everybody, whilst, as you were saying, Kenny was kind of away with the fairies a little bit. Cody was taking full advantage of that, doing his politicking to get to the leader of the group. And he, like, the sign that he's kind of got Matt and Nick maybe on his side a little bit is that they come out wearing the belts.
Crucially, Matt comes out wearing a belt. Nick doesn't.
Yeah, but that tells you the character dynamics, like
Yes.
immediately. It's so good. Like every little character, and of course that is then reiterated in the action. But the fact that Matt is wearing his Cody style, it's really weird now seeing somebody else wearing a Cody belt. Like it's been so much, like that's just part of his merchandise now. But yeah, Matt Jackson wearing a Cody belt, and he's just to show that politicking is the influence of it is in Matt Jackson's mind. As it's just a really, really nuanced way just to show you that even though he's got genuine gripes, Cody's been taking advantage of that, and he has kind of pushed Matt Jackson to get even more amped up and annoyed about this, so that he can become the leader of the Bullet Club. Like it's all like Cody is so important to this match and this story. He has a little cameo,
he's a good heel at this point.
So good. Like if you're watching WWE now, and you're like, oh, but if Cody character's being a bit bland, maybe it'd be cool if he turned heel. Yeah, don't watch this because you'll be going, oh no, he's amazing at being healed. Yeah, he is. Yep. He's so good at it.
There's a reason that AEW fans were screaming for him to turn heel. A lot of them could remember this because it's very fresh in the memories, and they're like, please, we want to, like, you're so good at this.
So I wonder how important this is to the fans' reaction to thinking they were seeing Cody heel notes. Like the way that this conditioned with such nuance that when you started seeing Cody doing certain actions in AEW, it felt like there were a lot of people kind of reading into it in the same way that this story is being read into.
Yeah,
they were like, oh no, they're doing little notes, little things to create a certain emotion, and like it felt like Cody was falling into. People kept calling him Homelander Cody, but that's because they were certain character notes that had like a fake kind of babyface aura to them, which was just pure Homelander, and it seemed to be working so well. Unfortunately, it was just Cody not doing babyface well. Like there were no notes. Well, but that kind of shows how influential this is outside of like the actual match style, which we'll get into. The actual storytelling, the character notes, and everything. It's just it. Not only is it throughout AEW, but it also influences how the audience watch AEW in the first few years.
Yep, I think in 2018 in the Lords of Pain like end of year votes, I like put BTE as an option for the best wrestling show because like I would be like waiting for the episode to come out because I'd just be like I'm so interested in seeing what happens next in this show. Let's get to the match though. Let's get to the match because it's a really good match. Really good to say the least. Let's give it its flowers as we always do here on the Match Guide. So the Wrestling Observer, Dave Meltzer, he rated it 5 stars. I believe he was in the building for this. He rated it 5 stars. Cage Match has currently got it rated 9.44. It is a match that has a big legacy, is one that's well known and loved by critics alike. As you said, Bucks are out first. The old tassels and the commentary notes that they've been a tag team from day one. They're brothers, except for, as we pointed out, Matt is wearing one of the weight belts that Cody Rhodes gifted them. Nick didn't want to wear it. Matt did. But then, like the other thing is he just said, oh, my back's sore, so I'm going to wear this belt to help support my back. And so it's like, is he wearing it for his back, or is he wearing it because he's like slightly siding with Cody in terms of like, hey, Kenny, Cody is being a better leader of this faction than you are, and I'm sort of on his side because I'm wearing his gift right now. But enough about weight belts and uniforms, because these guys are about to start wrestling, and it's a hell of a match. So they start out. Coda is going to start out with Matt, but Matt says he wants Kenny because his problem is with Kenny. Kenny like reluctantly joins in, but Matt then just cheap shots Coda and then tags out. What a jerk. Coda Ibushi and Nick have like just a lightning back and forth of attempted strikes and dodges. They all dodge, but then Coda Ibushi, he kicks Nick in the back, and Nick tags out, and Coda immediately just unloads a roundhouse kick into Matt's back and then follows it up by just viciously stomping his back. Kenny like jumps in to stop him, but even then Matt's not happy about that. He's not happy that Kenny's calling his guy off, even though his guy is attacking him. We said nuance before, but like I think this, like even just this introduction, it's like showing different goals, different things that people want to achieve in this match. Like Kota Ibushi, he's happy to tossed, right? Like he's just fat. He's like, Matt is pissed because he thinks that doing that, Kenny Omega is being condescending to him. So he wants to kind of like show him off. Nick, he wants to win, but you know, it's like immediately you see all these different characters interacting and doing different things based on what their established position and relationships with one another are.
Like, you can't watch this and not see the DNA for what becomes Kenny and Hangman versus the Young Bucks in AEW.
Oh, we're going to talk. Yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that.
There's a lot of it. What's crazy is, like, this is rated so highly, yet it feels like the proof of concept for what they want to do in AEW. Like, as great as this is, they then do it better. Like, this is the idea. This is you're seeing the idea for what it could be, which is it's kind of crazy to think about when you're watching this match. You're just like, oh, this is them proving that they could do storytelling like this in pro wrestling, and then they do it once they've got their home ground. Like, I think that's the most crazy thing about it. It's so good, yet I call it the proof of concept. That's kind of what it is. Also, we noted on the commentary, it's an interesting commentary team. I have no memory of this being a duo, but it's Jim Ross and Colt Cabana. What a random pairing that turns out.
Isn't it Jim Ross and Josh Barnett?
Is it Josh Barnett? It was a man wearing a cowboy hat. I thought it was Colt Cabana, but
no, it's definitely Josh Barnett, because earlier in the night is that moment where Switchblade suplexes Hangman into the guardrail and knocks.
That's the that's the summer show. That one.
Oh, that's different. Okay, maybe it is Colt Cabana then. Okay. I have one note later on about this, and that's JR is pissed that the legal man's not getting tagged in correctly, and I'm like, fucking hell. This was a warning sign, red flag. This is going to be a problem for a number of years.
There are many setups for what we'll get in AEW, and included in that is Salty JR. Like, he's right here.
We get into the pattern of the match as things heat up, and it's a lot of tandem offense, exchanging back and forth, either side, but interrupting often before they get through it, because of course the Bucks and Kenny, they've wrestled together so often, they know each other back and forth, they know what things they're going to do. But the wild card in this match and sort of the real difference maker in this mix is Kota Ibushi. He's just like bouncing around everywhere, very unpredictable. Like at one point he like sets up a fake dive off one turnbuckle. He climbs up, acts like he's going to jump, jumps down, runs across to the other turnbuckle and launches himself off onto the other person. I'd forgotten how like mental this guy is. Like Kota Ibushi at this point, 2018 Kota Ibushi, what an incredible athlete.
You forget about it because of I guess what's happened to Kota Ibushi in the last 5 years. But yeah, in this period, he is so incredibly athletic. Like we talked about the Kota Ibushi Cody match at Wrestle Kingdom. In that one, he takes a crossroads off of the apron and he drives his head into the ringside mat. Like that's it. Taking the craziest bumps is Kota Ibushi, and he's relatively fine. Like I don't know how he does it. The man who was when asked about his workout regime was like, "Oh, I don't work out." What? What are you talking about, Kota Ibushi? But he's in incredible shape, and his athleticism is absolutely insane. And there's a spot later on where he just jumps up onto the top rope with such ease, and like he's just so incredibly athletic. It's insane.
I often talk about the explosiveness of Kenny Omega, and like 2 weeks ago I talked about the explosiveness of Naito as well. And both of them, like they're like stop to go is just so explosive. And Kota Ibushi has that, but you don't feel the effort. With both those guys, you like feel the effort of them like hitting the jets. Kota Ibushi, he just like floats, he glides, he's so graceful, and yet he is an effortless, and yet he is like equally as fast and explosive as anyone. It's what a freak of a wrestler. And watching this match, rewatching this match just made me remember, wow, what an absolute stud of an athlete he was. So that's one pillar of the match is the difference maker, Kota Ibushi. Another key pillar, of course, is Matt's back, which is holding up but it, as the match progresses, is having more and more effect on the Bucks' signature offense. It's preventing them from executing moves properly. It's making him slow to get to pinfalls. Ibushi's kicks to his back are particularly brutal. Like that is like a key issue with the Young Bucks, is that Matt is not operating at 100%.
Which I guess is, I wasn't thinking about it whilst I was watching it, but now that we're talking about it, I was like, could that also be a mirror of his mental state as well? Like he's not operating at his 100% mentally because of numerous different reasons. But the fact that it's like that's all being funneled like through him selling the back or whatever. Like if you enjoy Matt Jackson holding his lower back, going, this is the match for you, you will get a lot of that. Like there's, especially because I think the thing that impressed me the most was we got our pre-Roman Reigns slow down talking during a beating moment. Like we got that during this match, whilst Matt Jackson's just on the ground selling his back, and I feel like that's just so needed to get across. I feel like again, when you see that Roman Reigns do it, he's just doing that to make his character seem like a badass. There isn't really normally any storyline purpose for that to happen. Here, the slowdown is used to get across Matt Jackson's back so that when the frenzy happens later on, you're like, oh shit, he's doing this and fighting through the pain, Tomohiro Ishii style, as he's like hanging on by a thread. Like it's so important, this slowdown moment. And later on with it looks like it might slow down again, but Matt Jackson then screams at Kota Ibushi, being like, "Is that all you got? Is that all you got?" Whilst he's kicking him in the back.
And it's interesting how you see the neutral pairings. So like you've got Kota Ibushi as the key aggressor at the start, and Matt as the key aggressor. But the neutral pairings, Omega and Nick, slowly get dragged into it. Like Omega starts hitting like he hits like this hard Irish whip, just throwing Matt into the turnbuckle and stomping Matt's back. And then Nick, who right at the start, I forgot to mention this, but a key thing at the start, Matt gets a table out and Nick like throws it away. He's like, no, we don't need a table. We're not doing that. We're having a wrestling match. Get back in the ring. But he starts to get more dragged into the match. And so both of them are getting more and more dragged into what's going on. And that like animosity comes out, Matt spits in Kota's face at one point. Kenny Omega picks him up and hits a full on backbreaker on Matt. He looks a little bit remorseful. I've heard this style that we're talking about as like melodramatic. And, people say, why would you feel bad for hurting your opponent in a wrestling match? And there's some logic to that argument that I do see. What do you think? What do you think on that? Like, when is it too far? And when is it just, interesting character and storytelling stuff?
Well, as I say, the storytelling and the character notes are why they're reacting like they are in terms of the reluctance to fight. Like, because wrestling is telling a story, and if you only look at it as this is a competition, and if you win, you go up the point ranking because you did a win, like that's not the story of this match. It's being used for something different than that. So for me, the context of what the story is like far more important than I'm a firm believer in. There's no such thing as thing equals bad. It's just thing done badly. For me, I'm a firm believer in that, and I feel like for this, especially like for that note, especially for me, that's somebody making a very bland thing equals bad statement, almost like I have to look at it in bad faith because like is that how you watch pro wrestling? Like that sucks. That you can't watch it in a different form. Because for me, I absolutely love all the character stuff for this because even though it is kind of dipping its toes into melodrama, we're not at that slow down Roman Reigns bit. Like we're not doing that. For me, that's much closer to melodrama because it's dipping its toes into that more to remind you what the story is. Whilst in this one, whenever it slows down, it's doing it to progress the story to something else and to set something up specifically. It feels more intertwined with the actual construction of the match. So for me, again, that makes it absolutely fine. If you're just doing melodrama to do almost like a flow break and being or stretch the match out, then I'm going to have issues with it. But here, it's so intertwined into the whole construction of what we see. It's and obviously the story they're telling with the different dynamics of all the people. Like the way the match flows later on doesn't have the same oomph if you don't have this first part where you get to see all those different dynamics.
Yep.
And again, this is the proof of concept because you see that play really well in the Young Bucks Hangman and Omega match, and it's still done really well here. I feel like it's just a tool that can be used by pro wrestling, and they proved it here. If you do it well, then it can be used really to great effect.
I think there's like everyone sits on a spectrum, right? Like there's different people have got different levels of tolerance. It also helps like what's your level of buy into the story that they're telling. But I did try and think about this just to like work out what my thoughts are, because there's times where melodrama doesn't work. Like for example, a really good example, really hated the time where Hangman and Punk, Hangman takes a big pause looking at the belt. Am I going to do this belt shot? I'm not going to be. Like,
that's
the longer you take, I feel like a few points to this, as I said, like your investment in the story is going to make a difference in this. Everyone's got different tolerances as to what they like in pro wrestling and whatnot. So, and there's no right or wrong for this. It's like a spectrum. But one thing I think is the longer you take out of the actual doing of moves in a match, the harder and the higher the bar for like you're going to need to be invested is. So like this match, I'm very invested in the story. I'm happy, like, and they're not taking ages in between each move. You know, it's a facial movement here or there. It's a spit. It's a couple of lines. You know, they're not cutting promos on each other. Whereas, you know, like that moment with Hangman, for example, that I'm using, and I want to use Hangman because I don't want to just pull up something that's like, oh, WWE, like, I want to pull up like one of my favorite wrestlers, right? Like doing something that I just did not like and getting that balance wrong. It's because he like took too long. He's like looking at it for too long. And it's like going into this match, you would know what your moral position is on this. Like you don't need to have this long of a crisis of conscience in the ring. And it's because he takes too long. Maybe if he'd done it quicker, it would have been like maybe he picks it up, looks at it, throws away. But standing there in his hand, anyway, look, I don't want to harp on about it, but I'm just saying, as a rule, like the longer you go for, and the more like that is between, the more air you're giving something, the higher the bar is going to be for like, are people going to be on board with this moment of drama?
But yeah, I totally agree. Just because with that, with him just taking too long, if he does it far quicker, then you're not zoning in on it. You're not just. For me, that's a difference of playing what should be the character note and then getting sucked into the crowd reaction, being like, oh, I can get more of a reaction if I tease it again. Yeah, but now you're into like cartoonish performance.
To move on with the match, to progress along, of course, as I said, it's a moment where JR is complaining about the non-legal man being involved. This is like such a breakdown pace. I could not give a shit, JR. I could not care less. The Bucks like really start to turn it up when Matt tries to convince Nick to do the golden shower. Not that kind of golden shower, not that kind of golden shower.
Oh, yes.
The 450 splash that it's they go up for it. Ibushi like isn't going to have any of that. He gets up, he pushes Nick off, and then Omega and him go for a superplex. Now I missed this on my original watch through, but I caught it this time. So Omega and Kota Ibushi are up there to suplex Matt off, and they don't quite get him up. Kota Ibushi has to do like a little step to stop to make sure Nick rotates fully and doesn't like drop onto the concrete head first. And probably I don't know what would happen, but it wouldn't. I can't imagine head first onto concrete from the height of a turnbuckle would be at all good. But what a little adjustment there to like save the match. Complete tragedy.
Yeah, I did catch that, and I was just like, "Oh bloody hell, Cody! You've probably saved everybody's lives there."
Yeah,
such a great.
Yeah, he's like, they're up there for a double team superplex. You've seen it 1,000 times, but for whatever reason, he doesn't rotate properly. Little step saves us from tragedy. Thank you, Kota Ibushi. The Golden Lovers then go for the golden shower themselves. Not that kind of golden shower imp on Matt Jackson, but they're pulled down by Nick. He's not happy. He has now picked up the table that he'd originally refused to use. He can't get to it, though, because Kota Ibushi intervenes. He takes Nick out, and that leaves Kenny Omega up there to tease putting Matt through the table with a one-winged angel. So the table's suspended between the ring and the guardrail, and he's standing on it to do a one ring angel. The crowd goes absolutely nuts for this. You know that this is absolute death if it gets hit. It doesn't know. Matt's kind of struggles out because he also knows that it's absolute death. But this is the moment, you know, where Kota Ibushi, like, he just glides up, he floats up onto the top rope, and then he hits this springboard suplex with Matt, just dumping him totally on his head. Insane set of spots there, like between the many golden showers and then like the superplex, and then that final suplex from Kota Ibushi off the top rope to onto Matt's head.
Well, as you're saying as well, it's just executed so perfectly. It's he springs up with that grace, and then the movie hits looks so brutal. It's just that's the moment which shifts the match into the next gear. So I can't remember what the move is in the Revolution tag, but there's a similar moment in there where a inventive spot happens, and suddenly that's when the match kicks into its next gear, and the fans just become way more alive to everything. But you're only seeing like the start of their like their ideas and their flows.
And like things just keep going. I can't list all the spots because there's so much going on. A key thing though is like Matt Jackson is like barely holding it together. He's like trying to put a Scorpion Deathlock on at one point and he can't, and then he finally gets it on, but he's like screaming in agony as he's doing it. And then, you know, like they try and pick Ibushi up for more bang for your buck, but Nick has to help him get it up, and that doesn't give them time. And then eventually the Young Bucks are on the offense, and Matt hits an elbow drop to the outside through that table that was set up at ringside with Kenny Omega on it. And it's like, who did this hurt more? You know, like, did this hurt Kenny, who was on the table, or Matt Jackson with the busted up back going through the table on the outside to take out Omega? Like, that's got to have hit him just as hard. And, you know, like as this match hits 30 minutes, they're just like, all that's left is they're just like slugging it out. Matt takes off the weight belt and he starts to whip Kenny with the weight belt, and the crowd is like not into that at all. So like at this point, the Young Bucks are firmly in the antagonist role, and while the crowd are buzzing and are up for it, they're really on Kenny and Kota's side. Kenny picks it up, and this is like Hangman picking up a belt. Kenny picks it up, looks at it, and throws it away immediately. He doesn't want it, but he still hits like just huge V triggers on Matt at this point. But, you know, more counters, back and forth after this. Nick and Matt go for the driver, and Matt can't properly, so once again needs Nick's help. And because of that, they don't have enough. Kota Ibushi has enough time to recover. As Nick goes to launch himself off the ropes for the Meltzer driver, he power bombs him through a table at ringside. The back spot, it just keeps paying off him. It just keeps on paying off.
I just love how in that entire flow, you can tell that Matt Jackson is just completely, if you're doing like the babyface heel, I guess, spectrum, he's purely in the baddie space right now. Like the red mist has descended and he is just going after them. And the spot with jumping onto Kenny Omega, I feel like highlights that really, really well. Instead of doing the smart thing and teaming on Kota Ibushi with his brother, instead it's like, no, fuck this guy. It's just dives right at him. Just and the way that it kind of hypes and flows after that as well, like almost like when he eats shit later with Kenny Omega hitting those V triggers, like that is partly Matt Jackson's fault. He's the one that's amped Kenny into that space. I just. I really like Kenny's arc in particular, where he starts the match just really tentative, and it takes Kota Ibushi being like, "This is a competitive match. You're going to have to get involved," and it takes a few minutes for Kenny to actually start doing that. But then he gets to this point, and he's flowing just as violently as Matt Jackson is, and I feel like it's such a well-told little story.
Yeah, and you know, like I know no one listening to this podcast will have this opinion, but it bears repeating. Like that knock on the Young Bucks, they're spot monkeys. They don't know psychology. They don't tell stories. They don't do selling. It's just, you cannot watch this match and not see it. Like this is a 10 out of 10 selling job from Matt Jackson. The way that he holds the back, affects the moves he's trying to do, and the way that works against the Young Bucks. And like the way he is just like screaming in agony as this match progresses, you know, like he can't get moves on right. He but he's gritting. He's trying to grit through it, but it's still hurting him. It is such an incredible sell job for Matt. I completely understand why they kept going back to the idea of Matt having a bad back, because he sells his back so well in this match, and like it works so well for the way that the Young Bucks are. Because normally, and the audience know this, their tandem offense is flawless, but Matt's back not working puts a wrench in that, and so it just emphasizes what's going on and the psychology of the match and the selling of the match, the selling of the back injury works so well with the Young Bucks. There's a good reason why they kept going back to this, and I think it seems to pop up from time to time, even to today. Matt's back.
I love how it puts like a wrench into that, as we say, that flow dynamic and everything. But then I also love how it also plays into hate is a powerful drug. So like he'll be holding his back in absolute agony, but then he will see one of the other two is vulnerable and he will just snap into it. It's almost like it doesn't matter how much he's hurting, he is going to do something bad to them. It's just it's such a good job.
Yeah, that powerbomb spot sort of really puts the Golden Lovers in full control of the match. It's actually a spot that is repeated in that match that you're talking about with Hangman and Kenny. Hangman powerbombs Nick through a table as they go to do the Meltzer driver. It's like a spot that is aped note for note in the Hangman and Kenny match versus the Young Bucks Revolution. Yeah, like the Golden Lovers, they're in full control heading into this ending stretch. Kenny is still slightly reluctant though to pull the trigger on Matt and hit the Young Bucks. Ibushi forces him to. Initially, he's hesitant to even like do a full V trigger, but Ibushi's just like, no, you're going to do it. And then puts him up for the one-winged angel, and Matt actually starts screaming at him just to do it. He knows that he is done. He can feel his back. He knows he's done. And he's like, just do it. Put me out of my misery. Stop delaying this. And it's almost like he's like screaming at Kenny to be like, stop trying to keep the peace. Like, you need to be the leader of the Bullet Club, you need to be slightly more ruthless. And to be more ruthless, you're going to have to take out your friend here. And so Kenny does pull the trigger. Matt interrupts that pin and is trying to fight off both men, but it's a fight that's in vain. Kenny and Ibushi take him out with a knee and suplex, and then they hit the golden trigger on Matt, their joint finishing move. It's such like a cool little ending way to end it. Matt is done. Nick is still trying to fight, but ultimately they're beat two individuals who are just superior to them in that moment.
It's everything we've talked about is just on full display in that final act as well, which is so impressive because that how long is this match? Is it like 40 minutes?
Yeah, it's definitely over 30 because the 30-minute goes and they've still got plenty left, so probably 40 minutes. Yeah.
So it's the fact that they're able to keep that up and set everything up, and it all kind of pays off at the end. So it all feels like it feels like it's an ending that's been earned as well. Because you've seen it before in wrestling where they might do that note of just end it type of feeling, but it doesn't feel earned or whatever. Whilst here it's like, oh no, it is so emotionally earned. It's just such a good ending for it as well, especially with knowing as well that this would be setting up whatever comes next. Well, like this isn't the end type of thing that always exists in professional wrestling. It's in the back of your mind, and I think that's what really works if you're watching it from Kenny's side as well, because he's not just thinking about, well, if I win this match, then I guess that's good. Like, no, he's thinking about what the impact of him actually going through with it means, which is kind of, I guess, the opposite point as well. It's like, well, you're meant to be the leader of a group. You can't be delaying doing this stuff like that. You can't. You see it all the time in other sports where they might start thinking about it a bit too much and they become not as good a player. Like in this moment, that's kind of what's happening to Kenny. Like he is not being that ruthless leader, and that's genuinely affecting him. So he needs to find that and get that back. And doing this is what gives him that again. And you kind of get that Kenny Omega back a bit so that he can actually take on Cody in half a year's time.
Yeah, you can't be... If you're a leader, you can't always take the middle way. You are going to have to put some people offside at different points. You're going to have to make some decisions that not everyone's going to agree with. And, in telling him to do that, Matt is just going, you've got to Like you've got to do this, Kenny. Like you've got to hit that trigger. You've got to be able to pull the trigger on this. And yeah, it's a clear win as well, which I like. And a fluke victory or anything. It's clear Matt's back has let them down. And he is a weak point. Nick is valiantly still trying to fight, but when he's up against two men at once, he can't take them. They take him out, and Kenny and Coda like pile on for the pin. Two people pinning him, and it's kind of beautiful at the end. Kenny like cradles Matt after the pin. He's not like he's won, but he's not happy that he's won. And there's some beautiful, just like tight close-ups on both teams as there's just like a feeling of unease. Kenny tries to check on the Bucks, but it's clear there's like still a lot of ill will in that moment. It's an uneasy feeling. And then who comes to the ring? Cody Rhodes comes to the ring. He comes out.
Yes, I believe.
And he gets in Matt's face because he's like, Matt, you've like let this side down. Like you've let Kenny win. And he gets in his face and he like throws Nick away in the same way that Kenny like threw Matt away early on. But it's obviously like not an accident. It's much, much more blatant. And so at this point, Coda and Kenny have sort of retreated to the back, but as Nick pushes Cody down, Kenny runs in and chases Cody off. And Nick gets up and Nick gives Kenny a hug. And then Kenny goes to hug Matt, but Matt can't bring himself to do it yet. There's a bit too much ill will in between those two, and he walks off with Nick, and Kenny walks off as Kenny cuts a promo, and the show finishes. It's just like adding on the story here because the story isn't finished, right? Like this is not the finish. Cody and Kenny haven't had their moment, and so the Matt and Kenny story sort of is still left lingering a little bit. There's still more to resolve there, even though you do get a little bit of resolution with Nick and Kenny.
Yeah, it's such a good segment as well. Everything we talked about with Cody Rhodes and maybe how he as a character was seeing what the purpose of this match was for him to do his power play, and then the Young Bucks losing and screwing everything up because they've not been able to prove that Kenny shouldn't be leader. Kenny actually stood up to the moment and proved he's still got it in him. So that is Cody Rhodes then comes out physically to berate them. It's just and it sets up what is going to be just like eventually we'll get to Kenny versus Cody, but I feel like it's so well done, just in terms of the emotion that were there in the match, just lingering amongst the crowd. Then Cody Rhodes kind of comes out as soon as Cody Rhodes comes out, you can just sense it that, this crowd are going to get the thing that they're wanting to see because that emotion is there. That they actually do want them after all that's happened. They do want these guys to all get along, and Cody is there for everybody to boo, for everybody to hate. And he plays his role absolutely perfectly, and it just it sets up the reuniting really well. Again, just more notes that we would see played in AEW. It's such an important match in what AEW style will become. All of the notes are here.
Yeah, look, let's move on to the legacy because you've started touching on it. Like it's so clear watching this that for the Elite, it's so easy to see how this is their vision for what weekly wrestling television could look like. Like it's different characters interacting. They even set up it's really TV coded in how they set up like a mystery box in room 710. They like don't show it what's going to happen. And like months later, you find out what happened in there, which sort of then reframes a lot of what's going on in the relationship, which is like something that happens in TV all the time. If you watch like sitcoms or prestige drama, like you'll see things like that where you like aren't 100% sure what's going on, and there'll be a revelation later on, and that doesn't happen in wrestling hardly ever. Like there's not like a mystery as to like where people stand in that way. I'm just trying to like in my mind, I'm trying to think like of a mystery that's not it's not who's under the black hoodie doing the really obvious move of one.
Well, the other thing, they had a literal mystery box.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just love the idea that somebody in creative was just like, we should do like a mystery box idea. They were just talking about the TV trope of a mystery box,
Yeah.
but they're so creatively inept that suddenly there's a literal massive box.
Yeah. Or the gold. Remember the golden egg? The Rock's golden egg, and like what that was going to be.
I absolutely adore the golden egg purely because it's all hyping up the Rock's movie on a night of appreciation for the Rock, and then he doesn't even turn up. It's so good. I know we're meant to be praising just this setup for AEW, but sometimes it's hard to not shit on.
Yeah, and also it's funny if this is like a pilot season for pilot season for AEW. It's even got like weird recast when you get to the final main season of it. Like Hangman is now like Kota Ibushi is now being played by Hangman, and Cody Rhodes has got like a completely different character, and he's kind of like off doing a different thing. And like Marty Scurll is now John Silver. Everyone's been recast, and the characters are kind of slightly different a little bit as well. But like it's just so clear to see from watching this is like the vision of the elite for how wrestling will look. Like, you've got the build up is all about the relationships, and how much have we seen like the relationship drama between Kenny Omega, Hangman Page, the Young Bucks, add in Swerve Strickland. Will Ospreay sort of understands this. I think MJF understands this to a degree. Like he tried to make his own relationship drama with Adam Cole. I mean, Adam Cole was part of this all at once. If you look back far enough in the Bullet Club things, like he was on BTE when he was in ROH. This is their vision for wrestling, and it's something they went on to do in AEW slightly differently. Like they didn't, as I said, like they didn't have invisible cameras as much in AEW, which they do in BTE. They don't have superpowers in AEW, which they do in BTE. They've never done a mystery box in the way they did with Room 710, where like these characters have a discussion that you don't know about, and all that you know is that like this was an important discussion, and then it's revealed what it was later down the line. Yeah, it's just very clear. This is their vision, and I found it super compelling, and it was one of the things that gave me so much confidence in like, I know AEW is going to be great because I just watched this season of wrestling in New Japan, the Bullet Club Civil War, and it was friggin' amazing. It was like one of the best things I've ever seen in wrestling.
Yeah, the thing that got me excited the most for AEW was just not just seeing that they were able to do like one match or one story flow and build to something. It was suddenly seeing them continue that momentum and just being like, oh, wait, no, they have got enough here. Clearly they've got enough juice or creativeness or whatever to actually do something really special here. At the time, obviously, we're building towards the first All In, so it's a very different thing that's being built to. There was I don't think at this point there's any rumblings of like AEW starting up or anything. At least publicly, whatever.
Well, this story sort of does resolve it. I mean, the Kenny Omega and Bucks story resolves itself when Kenny Omega wins the IWGP within like 2 months or so of this. So I think this is in like April. Kenny Omega wins it in May, wins the IWGP in late May at Dominion against Kazuchika Okada. And then when he is going to be in that incredible 2 out of 3 falls match, Kota Ibushi is by his side throughout the match. But then after the match, the Young Bucks come out. They've just won the heavyweight championship, so they're resolving their threat at that Dominion. And then they come out, and before Kenny Omega takes the IWGP heavyweight belt, he embraces Nick. He embraces Matt. He takes the belt. So that resolves their story. And then the Cody Kenny thing sort of peters out because they're moving towards All In, and Cody needs to quickly turn face because he can't be a heel when they're building to this show that he's like a huge part of. I
think I talked about it earlier, but it is literally they're all sat around a table talking about what they could do for the next season of being the elite, and Cody's like, "Can I be less evil, please?"
Yes,
that's it. That's literally it.
Yeah. Now, look, the other thing that is impossible to speak, not to mention, and we've already mentioned it a number of times, is talking about the sequel to this match, which is Hangman and Omega versus the Bucks from Revolution 2020. Like that Meltzer driver spot is literally exactly the same. There's a lot of similarities in terms of how things play out with Hangman and Matt being aggressive towards each other at the start. There's probably a little bit more drama between Hangman and like direct drama between Hangman and Matt, and than there is with Coda and Matt. But of course, Kenny Omega trying to keep the peace slowly gets dragged into it. Nick also gets dragged into it. The Young Bucks are like being dickheads throughout the whole thing, and escalating more and more as dickheads throughout. I've reviewed that one for the match guide. I'm now reviewing this one. What are your thoughts in terms of comparing the two?
Because this one is almost the prelude or the template for it. It's weird to compare them because in that case, it's like it's very blatant that the second one's going to be better because this is. Weirdly, I don't call it a sequel. I do call this this is the proof of concept, the template, whatever. And then the actual thing happens on AWTV. It's an interesting one just because I feel like the change of making essentially the Kota Ibushi character in Hangman, giving him way more, I guess, agency and centering the story around him. Like, it's centered around Kota Ibushi in this one, but in the Hangman one, like you get so much more screen time with the Hangman character. And I guess that's the style as well, where you've got he was being the Elite was telling so many different stories that you had so many characters on every episode, and then New Japan Pro Wrestling style, you don't really get promos in that same way. So, because again, they go for a very different style. So you're not going to you can tell a very different story. And I guess their vision for their story, it fits way better in their own company. And that meant they could make that character far stronger. And for me, it makes the match far more compelling to have the same dynamic and flow. Like after we're talking about everything from Matt and Nick's arc to Kenny Omega's arc, like it's identical, almost the way that they flow. The thing that changes is the Kota Ibushi character. That character having its way stronger arc throughout it as well, because everything in that one building up to can Hangman actually trust? Can he actually trust Hangman? Are the books correct in what they're saying? And then Hangman gets that moment where he could bookshot Kenny, like it's just the way that was all built to without that. The fact that everything happens and almost nothing is settled, I think is what makes me love the Revolution one. All of the anger and animosity is still just in the air, even though they've had their big blow off match, apparently.
And Hangman's doubt in Kenny as well is a really interesting thread in that match that you don't have, because in the lead up to this match, they're the champions, and this is the biggest thing that Hangman's ever won, and yet Kenny. It doesn't really matter. Kenny's still saying the Young Bucks are the best tag team, and he's off like matches with Pac, in the days leading up to this match against supposedly the best tag team in the world, according to Kenny Omega. And Hangman's like, do you really care about me? Do you really care about this match? And that how that factors into the match as well. I think that makes it slightly more compelling. But we're talking about two of the best matches either of us have ever seen. So it's it's really splitting hairs. I cannot think of anything more to say. We've talked a lot. I can't think of anything more to say.
It's probably been one of the fastest feeling recordings because there's just so much to get through. There's so much in it.
I feel like
it's a dense episode.
Yeah, we did not put the break on for a good 2 hours or so, however long this has gone for. But I'm really glad we got to look through this match. And as I said, like a lot of this translated into like what AEW became when we're talking about the movements and the people and the wrestlers and the whatnot that influenced how AEW was. Like this is really up there in terms of like you can see the vision and you can see what they're going for. Imp, you've now got a podcast about AEW as well. I have. Do you want to tell the good people where they can find you?
You can find me on Social Suplex, or no, I was going to do a little bit about what we were talking about in the chat in the amongst the hosts. Where it's like Sosu. what do people call it? Sosu now. That's what we affectionately call it.
That's what the newbies call it. That's what the Tim Hunters of the world call it.
It's Social Suplex with Daddy Donovan and his young boy. But yes, Imp's AEW Adventures podcast on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. I release every single Monday. So, actually, when you listen to this, my episode will come out. It comes out the same. These will be coming out the same day, so it's actually quite a good time to plug. But mine will release way later in the day, and it's like a third of the length, if that. Like it's a quarter of the length of this. So my whole point is I'll do like an hour recording, then I'll trim it down to like 30 minutes. So it's like a really to the point, very highly edited. Here you've been able to hear like the real me, the version I try and hide. It's been let out. But yeah, here we've in my show, I'm a highly edited version of me as I just go through the week that AEW was. And by the time that this is happening, what's the delay? Because I'm trying to think, will I be reviewing Revolution? I can't remember.
This will have gone out. Revolution will be well in the rear view. This will be cool. WrestleMania time, actually. This will be going out around WrestleMania. We're competing with WrestleMania.
Oh, shit. We can pick on Cody again. You can't get rid of him. It's just over my shoulder the whole time. Yeah. You can follow me on Blue Sky. I mostly at the moment just repost other Social Suplex people stuff or my friends or whatever. I'm not active enough at all on social media. Twitter conditioned me to not engage, and I need to kind of break that a bit and actually engage because in Blue Sky you can have an actual conversation. I forgot that that's what Twitter used to feel like. You could actually talk to people about a topic instead of whatever. But yeah, so I'm on Blue Sky. Follow me there. But I post every single Monday around like 8-10 p.m. UK time for like a 30-minute episode.
Yep, a nice dip your toe into what the goings on in AEW and how Imp's feeling about it and what's going on in it, what's catching his eye. You can find me on the Discord, on the Social Suplex Discord, which is, as I said at the top, great place to chat about each and everything. This afternoon, I was just having a conversation as we record this. I was having a conversation with my good friend Rambone Slampig, who I should get him on this podcast one day. He's one of the great posters on the Discord. Shout out Rambone. We're having a chat about Frank Turner and Sturgill Simpson in the music thread. Fantastic stuff. I don't know if you know either of those guys, Matt, but they're
absolutely not.
Two fantastic singers. So you can jump in there. You can talk about that. You can talk about all different kinds of wrestling, all of the hosts, for the different shows on the network. If you want to recommend a match that you think we should look at for this season of the Match Guide, it's not too late to jump in and suggest something. I haven't booked out this whole season yet. So I'm keen to get back to AEW matches at some point in the future. Don't know how long I'll be looking at outside, but I've been keen to do this since near when I started the podcast, to be honest. And I was thinking I should do matches outside of AEW as well at some point, and we're doing it now. And so if you can think of a match, I'm thinking we're going back I'm thinking WCW stuff, ECW stuff, the things Tony Khan grew up on, I think we've got to touch on. There's definitely some WWE stuff we need to touch on, and that I've got planned for the rest of the season. But coming up next week, I've recorded this already, and it's a show that's really, really something that I love jumping into. We're talking Shikara. We're talking Eddie Kingston versus Mike Quackenbush. When you're talking about wrestling shows and promotions that took character and story seriously in a way that wrestling hadn't really done. In terms of long-term, I'm talking like long-term, multiple-year story arcs and that sort of thing, and really thinking through those sorts of things. Shikara are a promotion that is on the cutting edge of that in the early 2000s and 2010s. So we're digging into that then. We're looking at Eddie Kingston versus Mike Quackenbush, and that will be in 2 weeks' time, also on Monday. My voice is fast dying, Imp. So thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. It's been fantastic to be back in the AEW Match Guide, in the hot seat. We're 3 episodes in, and I can see blue sky ahead. I can see open, clear waters ahead. I can see sunshine. I can see great things ahead for the AEW Match Guide. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it, and I cannot wait to see you again in 2 weeks' time. Have a fantastic fortnight. So, Imp, you're still there?
I am still here and alive.
So it's about 2 weeks later or so, and
Oh yeah.
I got some very interesting things in my inbox, Imp. You know, I've put out these sorts of feelers before, but I've never received a response until now. And this is a pretty big one because we have got a direct message from Matt Jackson going into some depth about some of the things that went into this match, some stuff that was going on backstage in New Japan at the time, and also some really interesting information about like their thoughts on what this match means for them and AEW as well, which is really in sync with what we talked about in the podcast. So I'm really excited to read this out. But before I do, I did just want to let the listeners know, look, the reason that we decided to do it this way is if we had tried to shoehorn this in, it wouldn't have made sense because honestly, we had this information when we recorded it, we would have constantly been talking to it because some of it actually backs up our own thoughts. So we would have just been, we would have been, we would have been constantly quoting this. So it would have been impossible for us to subtly drop this in having already recorded it. And for those who ever record audio, it would have been impossible for Imp and I to go back and record the episode because we'd already said everything and we would know what everyone's points are. It just would not have worked. So that's why we decided to do it this way. I hope you guys are excited. We're super excited. As I said at the start of this episode, there's some stuff in here that is like legitimate news that I don't think anyone else has ever spoken about before. I don't think it's ever really been revealed. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to get into it. Are you ready, Imp?
I'm ready. Do you want to read the quote first before we?
That sounds like a great idea. Well. Yeah. So I'm beforehand, I have permission to quote in full, and it's from Matt Jackson from the Young Bucks. Pretty awesome that we get that. A lot of the time, this sort of stuff's done on background. So shout outs to Matt Jackson. We really appreciate. If he's listening right now, I don't know if he would be. Probably not. He's got better things to do to listen to quotes by himself. But yeah, really appreciate him allowing us to do this. But let's go. Okay, so this is their quote. This is quoting Matt Jackson directly. We joked that it was like Corey and Topanga. I don't think I've said that. This is me jumping in, by the way. That's an American thing, Corey and Topanga. I don't know. Americans will know what that is. Anyway, back to the Matt Jackson quote.
I was like, should I have looked that up before we did this? Probably. No idea.
I think it's we're not going to jump in like this all the time, guys. I just sort of add this context because apologies if I said that wrong. I think there's like a lot of millennial guys about my age who are like, how do you say that wrong? Anyway, okay, let's quote. We joked that it was like Corey and Topanga. Everyone just wanted to see them together, and it was torture for the fans. And it truly felt that way because Kenny was our best friend by far in Japan, and we had to completely stop hanging out in order to commit to the bit. In many ways, it felt like a real-life breakup. It was very emotional. I remember us feeling so relieved once it was done. NJPW fought us a lot on the booking, but it was a major case of us forcing our hands. There was some skepticism over the Long Beach tag because there was hesitancy about bringing me and Nick up to the heavyweight division. We strong-armed our way into that as well. That was at a time when BTE was the driving force in alternative wrestling, and everyone hung on to every little detail we shared. It made for making art super fun. But also, there was so much responsibility. Us and Kenny wrote it all together and crafted it daily, carefully. Maybe the most exhausted I've ever been mentally after a program. We all laid on the floor afterwards for an hour and didn't talk a whole lot. Lol. It wore on us. But we just knew it was important because it felt like what we were doing was something new, and this word gets tossed around too much, but in a way revolutionary. Between the attention to subtle detail and the hints, foreshadowing, using music to create tone, BTE is what we wanted AEW to be, to tell stories in a new way. Wow. There's a lot in there. There's so much to jump into. And I want to spend I was probably going to spend a good 15, 20 minutes breaking it down because there's a lot of depth. Let's just go from the start and we'll work our way through it. The first thing that I thought was interesting, I've got to be honest. I don't think he's being 100% on the up and up with me here, because I remember seeing episode with that thing about how they had to split up and how they didn't see each other. Because I remember watching BTE episodes, and you'd see in the background Kenny would be by himself in quotes, but you'd see in the background the boys hanging around while he shot his bit. So I don't know how real they're being with us on that. Maybe it was different when they were over in Japan or something, or maybe I'm selectively seeing bits, but skeptical wrestler eye on that one, I think.
Yeah, I feel like you got to continue to sell the bit. Genuine separate, like Sandman style. Like you got to properly sell it. Like we split it up a bit.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting how they're talking about how much they had to force their hand going into the heavyweight division, and I'm so curious about what that sort of looked like, because they'd been such a fixture in the junior tag division, and they shot an angle on BTE right at the start of the year about hanging the belts they'd just won in the rafters in Corrigan Hall, and they just won that's the junior titles we're talking about. And it's interesting that they must have shot that when they were, New Japan bookers were probably thinking like, what's going on here? You just won those titles. We've got, programs or something lined up for you, and you guys are saying you're not even going to defend them. What the hell?
Because we have seen it in New Japan where there's a bit of a reluctance to elevate junior acts into that heavyweight division, especially in this era that they're talking about. Like after them, there was like issues with Kushida, with I guess does Hiromu Takahashi also fall into that bracket? Just somebody tickled it, but they would never like fully pull the trigger and let them. So the fact they actually did let them, because I'm assuming there's been other fights with other juniors, and they just haven't resulted in anything. But the fact that they actually went with it here, I do find that interesting. That it wasn't a New Japan thing where they're like, yeah, let's just go for it. They had to actually fight for that.
Yeah, and it kind of highlights the split between Western and Japanese wrestling, because at this point these guys were multi-time ROH tag winners. They'd won all sorts of like PWG tag belts, all sorts of belts. There's like a famous shot of them outside the Tokyo Dome with like carrying 4 belts or something, including the juniors. And so they've justified themselves in like a heavyweight, open weight, or whatever you want to call Western wrestling division, but they're still in the juniors. And, looking at them, even at that point, like they've gained a bit of bulk now, and they were still a bit chunky then, but they're not tall guys, like, and their style fit that junior style. So I can see New Japan's hesitancy in going like, do you guys really fit in a division that is, at that time you had teams like Lance Archer and Davey Boy, 2 giant, but the Killer Elite Squad they were called. Yeah, Killer Elite Squad, 2 absolute huge behemoths. And then, Sonata and Evil, who would both go on to become heavyweight champions individually in their own right. And of course, in Bullet Club, you had the Guerrillas of Destiny as well as heavyweight ones. So I can see why backstage they'd be like, hold on, pump the brakes on that one, boys. Like, you guys are the junior team of Bullet Club, because we've already got a heavyweight team and you don't match up with the other heavyweights in this division necessarily.
Yeah, and obviously the one episode Matt Jackson might actually be listening to, and he called him Chunky. He's Chunky Boy.
Hey, look, they've been on Tunnel Talk, and Tunnel Talk told them to their faces to get their shirts off and show off those beautiful chests.
That's a point, yeah.
They can take it.
If anything, it's Matt Jackson's fault for getting in touch with Social Suplex. This is on him.
You know what this division, this podcast network is about, Matt.
But yeah, I do find because when you watch New Japan Pro Wrestling, if you watch it enough, you do get that feeling there is a much more distinct separation compared to in the West, where the vision's more flow and things. It's not as kind of segmented as well, to be fair, like it used to be with the whole cruiserweight division. And the lesson learned from WCW was, when those talent get over in the cruiserweight division, elevate them. They've proved themselves. People do want to see that in the West. So it's interesting to see that when a Western night goes over to Japan and kind of experiences that, and you can just see it like it from my point of view. When I was watching at the time, I wanted to see that elevation. I wanted to see that sort of thing, because I am a Western fan. Like I can't hide the fact that I watch a Japanese product with my Western glasses. I find it interesting that they were allowed to do it. That's the thing I do find interesting, that they fought for it and were allowed to do it and got a big program. I don't know what helped sell it. I don't know if it was paired with the idea of doing something with Kenny and Kota. I don't know if that's what helped it, but the fact it came with a big program like this definitely like helps make it feel like a big deal.
Well, it says in here there was some backstage skepticism about that Long Beach tag, and these guys, like the Bucks, Kenny and Ibushi, it seemed like they really just went out and shot their angle with BTE. And you do hear stories about that, of them like just going out and shooting their own angles. And because BTE was so popular, like BTE, I mean, Japanese fandom is its own thing. And I'm sure they have that's like its own thing. But BTE in 2018 was very much the driving force of New Japan fandom in the West. There was a huge faction of the crowd. You know, you'd see these guys would do these bits on BTE, and then a week later in ROH, they would be chanting from the bits in BTE. There would be merch from BTE that would be selling out in Pro Wrestling Tees. It would constantly be best-selling merch in Pro Wrestling Tees. Like, this was a driving force. And so I think this is a good example of them knowing what the fans wanted and knowing what they want to do creatively, and I guess just not taking no for an answer, which is something you hear about, particularly entrepreneurs and, you know, creative types who have to sort of really fight for their vision. And sometimes it doesn't work out. But in this case, like, you know, we talked about this match. It absolutely worked out. These guys had a clear idea of what they wanted to do, and they went out there and pushed for it. And I'm glad they did. Like, it's good that they did, because what if they had just, you know, sat back and done another round of junior tags, like what would have been achieved by it? You know, just a bunch of what they'd already done. But instead, we got something that was really unique, and particularly like the BTE creativity, which is a good segue into like the next bit that they talk about, with how BTE was just like a driving force in alternative wrestling, and how they crafted this story and how they thought about, like, this is a different way for us to show TV, which is something we actually talked about in our episode. Nice for Matt to back us up here. It's nice that like we are seeing what they're putting down and what they were putting into it when we're watching BTE and saying like, this is a vision for TV. That is actually what they were thinking as well. That's what they were trying to do. And I'm glad they did, because it was so different and so engaging as a result.
Because, yeah, when you do analyze a piece of media, sometimes it does happen where I'm looking at it and I'm like, am I making this all up? Like what I'm talking about with all these like hidden things and the nuance to it? Because it's not like front and center, I'm just like, wait, am I sometimes making this up? Am I reading too much into it? Is this my film production brain analyzing something that's not actually there, just latched onto nothing? So it's good to find out that no, we were on the money there. We're totally on the money.
Yeah. Well, there's some famous examples, like Stephen King, for example. I remember him sharing something once where he was talking about in a book, you know, a fan came up to him and was telling him all about like, oh, the symbolism in this thing. And Stephen King was like, that was 20 years ago that I wrote that. I can't even remember what you're talking about. Number two, I never think about things that deeply. Like, you know, like really just being like, no, I never thought about it that way. But in this case, like in this quote we've got here, you know, the subtle detail, the hints, the foreshadowing, the music to create tone, that was really things that they were thinking of and trying to sculpt into it as a way of like telling this story that they were telling, and how they wanted us to almost tune in as if it was like TV. And as they've said in there, like very simply, BTE is what we wanted AEW to be. And you can see that in some of the stories that they've managed to do. Like, I think because AEW is ultimately funded by Tony Khan and booked by Tony Khan, and it has lots of different creative forces within that locker room and within the creative room, you do see lots of different kinds of things. But, you know, particularly in like the way they did the story of Hangman, you know, even the way they did the story of Brandon Cutler, you can see like these guys were able to execute their vision for what they wanted to present in AEW.
You can see it because we're talking about the kind of nuance and the methods of telling the storytelling. You can see it in other parts of it as well. Like it's included in the silly bits, like when you watch early AEW and SCU with that, this is the worst town I've ever been in. Like all of that is crossing over from that BTE era, trying to bring all that stuff that they were doing across there, including the silly bits. Like it's just interesting to go back and watch that early AEW and see all of that within the DNA of the company just as it starts off. But also, like, we can't forget how, I want to say, dumb storytelling in wrestling was in America before AEW launched. At the time, it was like if there was any form of nuance in a story, it was screamed at you three or four times per episode, so there was no nuance left at all. So like it was like catered to the dumbest of the dumb, so everybody could follow. Well, this was like, well, does it have to be like that? Like, surely we can do something different here. And that's what I love about Hangman's arc in those first 3 years. Basically just kind of taking what they were setting up here and proof of concepting it with hangers. Just to be like, no, we can do a way more nuanced story and we can do an adult story. Because I remember that they were the two things that were said. It was adult storytelling and more sports focused, which was amazing when Rocky Romero then went to Japan and did some like basketball stuff during a match. This is what you mean, Mike. What you mean. But just to see all of that proof of concept, and with Hangman, that more adult storytelling meant like a battle with mental health or with alcoholism, like genuine, more adult topics to talk about. Because wrestling doesn't have to be stupid poopy jokes; like it could be something genuinely really big and important. But you can see all of that DNA in BTE, and to hear, see Matt Jackson basically just saying like, "Yeah, we were this is what we were kind of thinking, which is what we're trying to put together." And here they put so much into it that they were just knackered afterwards. I mean, that's proof that they were putting a lot of effort into those fine details.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great image, isn't it? Just them all like flat on their backs at the end of it all. And I like, and look, to go back to that first point where I was, gazing at some of this with a bit of skepticism, a bit of, because it is, they are wrestlers after all, they're workers. When they're talking about like that Corey and Topanga, I believe what that is like it was a TV show with these two teenagers and they're never together, but the audience wants them to be together. And that is kind of how they played it out with first Kenny and Coda and then Kenny and the Bucks, like you wanted them to be friends. And then of course you get the final crescendo of that moment, which is like the ending of the thing. And I can't even remember if we talked about this in the episode now or not, but when Kenny finally wins that IWGP championship in the 2 out of 3 falls match against Okada, the first thing he does before he grabs the belt is hug Matt and hug Nick. Because they left it open after this match. After this match, the Lovers versus the Bucks, he hugs Nick, but Matt, there's still too much ill will there with Matt. But after the 2 out of 3 falls, they finally get that, I guess, the Corey and Topanga moment where they they kiss, and my memory might be a bit wrong, but they at least hug, and then he gets the title, and they're back together. But the point is like the friendship and the characters having this reunion is much as important as the triumph. And I think one of the great things about this BTE and the way that they were looking at things and how they've talked about it is, you could just watch this from the matches and it's incredible and you'd get the sense of the story, but the more you know, the more you appreciate. And the more you dig in, the more you appreciate with the subtle details, with the things that they're doing, with, the way they position in the rings and the way they, the different moves they use and the facial expressions. And that's why we've got a 2-hour podcast about these matches, because they put so much effort into it all. And it seems like a lot of it is intentional to reward people who have been paying attention, who've been, watching every single episode of BTE and are looking for the details and want to know everything that's going on. It's incredible.
I remember it might have been the build up to Kenny Cody, but I remember you saying at the time that it was like the extended edition of Lord of the Rings, where BTE isn't necessary for you to enjoy watching New Japan Pro Wrestling. But if you did watch it, then you got so much more out of the world and what was happening. You'd be so much more invested. And
I've said that with a number, even in AEW at times, I've said that's a way of, particularly, in the Hangman arc, that was a huge part of that. I've said that a number of times. I don't have a lot more to add here, Imp. I'm incredibly proud that we got this and incredibly excited to get that news. Like, as I said, like, I don't think anyone's ever talked about that. I don't think they've talked about how they really had to push so hard to get into the heavyweight division. Very cool to receive this. And Look, I'm keen. I'm going to be continue putting those feelers out because it's incredibly cool to get this sort of information through after we've done a deep dive on a match and really find out from the wrestlers themselves what they thought. So is there anything else you just want to add, having, heard what Matt was saying about the match and reflecting on what we spoke about a couple of weeks ago as well?
I guess if I'm going to hint on anything, it would just be the same points we hinted on. Just watching this match and seeing the DNA for what would become of AEW with what Matt's talking about here, and then seeing that repeated with how they carried out the Hangman arc as well, over like a much longer period, because they did have weekly TV to do it. I feel like just watching this, especially with these quotes now, was watching this match and then just reanalyzing those first few years of Hangman's arc specifically. There's a lot to it. That it's a really interesting dive to just go to compare these two, to look at those two worlds, which we've done such a big deep dive. I need to stop talking because I just repeat myself.
Yep. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Look, thanks for jumping back on with me, Matt. I'm talking about you, Matt. You imp, Matt, not Matt Jackson. Thank you, Matt Jackson.
He's got a new favorite Matt now.
Yeah, sorry, you're playing second fiddle on this one, Matt. I'm gonna be billing Matt Jackson up first on this one. I'm sorry. But yeah, look, really appreciate it. I don't know if he's listening or not, probably not, but as I said before, but yeah, really appreciate. Really awesome to get direct quotes and being able to attribute it so clearly. Next time, why not jump on a podcast with me though? That's gonna be the next step. Getting a wrestler on, a wrestler on to talk about their match. That'll be the next step. So I'm just gonna put that out in the universe. But yeah, look, thanks for jumping back on. Look, honestly, we don't get this sort of response from a wrestler if we aren't doing the deep dives that we do. So to all the guests out there who've jumped on, I'm really thankful for the effort that gets put in to these episodes from you. I really appreciate the energy and the feedback I get from the audience. As I said, I don't get a quote like this and an opportunity like this without that. So yeah, look, yeah, thanks. And onwards and upwards to bigger and better things, more awesome things coming this season. I've got plans. I've got some big plans, some awesome ones. Next week, of course, I'll be talking about Eddie Kingston versus Mike Quackenbush from Shikara High Noon, one of the great wrestling promos and an amazing babyface championship win that you will ever find. If you haven't watched that match before, jump onto YouTube and get ahead of the episode, because it's a really fantastic match and a lot of familiar faces in there as well. If you're an AEW fan, there's a lot of familiar faces around that ring, including the Young Bucks. They're in that. They're one of the people at the ring there as well. A little bit younger Young Bucks than they were in 2018. But yeah, look,
I did forget something. I knew
yes.
it. Brody King is one of the young lions at the side of this match. I completely forgot to mention it.
Oh, really?
Review. Yeah,
I did not notice him, but I'll have to go back next time I watch this match. I'll be looking for him. There you go. Cool. Well, look, thanks for jumping back on again, Imp. Really appreciate it. Thank you for listening in. Thank you to the Young Bucks. Really appreciate it. Thank you to Social Suplex. Make sure you check out all the awesome shows we've got and come back in 2 weeks' time for another episode of the AEW Match Guide. Thanks for listening to the AEW Match Guide podcast. If you enjoyed the show, then you can subscribe on the podcast app of your choice so you never miss an episode. Also, feel free to let me know on Twitter at Sir_Samuel. I'd love to hear from you. The AEW Match Guide podcast is brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network, where you can find many other fantastic podcasts discussing not just AEW, but all parts of the world of professional wrestling. Looking forward to seeing you again next week. I'm Sam Brown.